Okay, well, I'll start again. Yeah, Gary Bright, I'm an infrastructure developer. I work for a managed service provider. We're based in the UK. And we predominantly host like infrastructure as a platform solutions for our customers. Our customers range from a lot of different sectors, but I suppose that on a whole, the majority of our customers are from the fintech industry. We help support a lot of what we call challenger banks. I don't know if you have these in the US. So very small startup banks. They may only have like 10 customers, but the market's really exploded in the UK. But they all need to comply to regulation, and we're able to help them on that journey and get them started, and hopefully get them into a successful bank. I am, I suppose, Microsoft by trade. That is my bread and butter, I suppose. I'm also open to hugs, so if you feel like at any point I need one, then please feel free to come up. I'm also on GitHub. Yeah, that is a username born out of frustration of not actually finding a username that I wanted, only to find the other one had already been taken. So yeah, that's why I ended up with two. Cool. Okay, let's start at the beginning. So my chef journey started Community Summit back in 2015. Just getting into configuration management, if I'm honest. We were still just trying to find out where it fitted in, what it could do. We've obviously heard some good things. So yeah, we signed up, Kellogg and I, we went to this Community Summit in London. And I'm very privileged, I think, because I was literally just a face in the crowd at that point. But we were quite privileged to be witness to both InSpec and Chef Compliance launching at that event. And for me, it was literally a light bulb going off. I've come from an enterprise background where, they maintain very large binder of, internal security policies, really large documents that you have to painstakingly work your way through to make sure that you deliver to that internal security thing. And the whole idea around taking that documentation and then applying that to code, it was just, instantly see the benefits. Out of the box, you've got the ability to scan scan against decent and known baselines. The reporting side of thing, again, was really good in that it was really hard to kind of articulate or gather the information that we're using the tools that we currently had. And so just to have that there and actually just automate it from an end-to-end point, it was the ability to be able to scan more than one node against a particular baseline. It was, very positive. And I think from the biggest one was that they had already aligned themselves to the CIS standards. We, as an organisation, base our build standards against this standard. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it. It's a really good security baseline to adopt, join in. It's community-driven. The settings and the controls that are in place that get defined as part of the baseline can be debated. If they set something, then you can petition on the forum to get it to change. And so we use these to layer on the security baselines against anything that we deliver. So not just OSs, but they also apply to SQL application stacks and stuff, and you basically just layer them on. So as a solid foundation, Chef Compliance would instantly help us with what we need to do for our regulatory PCI compliance, reporting for the FSA. These are all the things that we currently have to do. But actually, talking it over and kind of debating it inside, internally within our organisation, we actually thought it was a platform for something else to kind of complement what we needed to do, the kind of things that fall outside of the compliance. Everyone's compliance is important, we've got to meet it. But at the same time, we kind of thought, well, there are things that we would like to be compliant on that don't necessarily fall into regulatory compliance. So the idea around lessons learned and best practice, these could be very internal to you. You may have a best practice for, your OS or application delivery, it doesn't have any regulatory requirement to be set that way, but as an organisation, you've defined that standard. And it was like, well, we defined those standards for delivering of applications. Why didn't we have those as code? So yeah, we were really, really excited about those. And lessons learned I think was quite key. It's it's around the idea of just looking to try and, if you had an outage, for example, and stuff like that, or something where you've then learnt a lesson that you've then had to go around and check, oh, are we exposed anywhere else across any of our other customers? It was those. They were the ones that we thought we could go after. So we chose internally to deploy compliance first. As I said, we were starting our chef journey early. We hadn't gone the chef server route, so we weren't writing recipes and going through the automation. We went with compliance first because basically we thought we could get a quicker ROI and get back to the business. So our ability to basically be able to be faster to deploy, you've already got the baselines, they're already in. It doesn't take too much to actually get it stood up and then actually start consuming some results. And then hopefully benefiting from those 2 sections I mentioned earlier, just going after the accuracy of the configurations of your systems, trying to reduce that rework where you build a server and you give it over to your application guys and then they say, well, you didn't set this, and it comes back, and all that time and lag where systems are jumping between departments, just focusing on the accuracy, getting that done. And the lessons learned piece is about reducing the unplanned work, just trying to find those things that will potentially cause you or your customers basically loss of service. And of course, you have to focus on delivering that. So basically, we thought, well, if we ended up defining our compliance requirements first, i.e. what is compliance to us, then we would gain insight on what is important. And I think a nice side product of that is that by defining what is compliant to you, like what are your important compliant aspects, then I think it gives you a blueprint to define like the functional spec of what you need a recipe to do in Chef to basically remediate against the thing that you found as misconfigured. So yeah, that was the plan. That's what my boss pitched to the board, and so we went for it. It's me. It's a Cornish waves, quite common. So yeah, my boss laid out the mantra. Yep, he wasn't messing around. So yeah, we would write a compliance profile for all devices that we had in production. That was the aim. If a customer had suffered a Sev1 outage, so a really service impacting outage, then we would pull together to write a control to kind of work on, right, this issue happened, let's see if we're exposed anywhere else. So where do we look? Where do we start? So I'm giving you some ideas here between 2 different parts. So targets and compliance. So targets are the things that you're going to basically target as part of your InSpec or Chef Compliant routine. So we started at our device matrix. So if you have a similar list in your organization, then consider what you've got in your estate. I'm talking everything. Servers, bare metal switches, fiber channel, firewalls. If you've got any particular device that's got a network interface, remote management cards, we could go on. Just try and consider that in your organization and then where that would fit. And basically, we went to try and target everything that we could. The service catalog also included application lists, so it wasn't necessarily an endpoint for an OS, but maybe part of the management stack might include some software or something like that. So maybe you could write a compliance control around each of the components in your management stack. Is it correctly configured and stuff like that. Then on to the basically the best practices part. The build standards, the setup guides. If you've got anything where you've got, you're asking someone to configure a system in a particular way, look to try and convert that into code. I mean, they are great examples. SQL handover documents for us were such a big win where, to layer up a SQL server and get it configured in the way that it needs to be done. We were spending ages to try and get, that kind of stuff done, and then people were then validating the work that we had done. If you can basically deliver a system, show them the report that showed that it's already configured, they don't have to worry about double checking your work. So yeah, they were quite keen, and like I said, we'll build standards, how you configure your OSs and stuff. we layer on top of the CIS standards, but we still have stuff that we know that we want configured. And then lessons learned. So previous events, we went back through the ticket history on our ticketing platform. We had a look at major Sev1 incidents. Why did we have these? Is there any way that we could basically analyze from what had happened that we could basically write a compliance control around? And then you're just trying to reduce that. And then frontline, so people on the front line, talking to the people that are dealing with the help desk or maybe on the first line on the telephone. They were really good at, I think they did a good job of masking a lot of issues, and it wasn't until you have those one-to-one coffee chats where, tell me what it is that keeps burning. Why do you keep getting, you keep getting woken up out of hours? A lot of checks that we got came out of those type of conversations, and it's really hard, I think, to just get people to give you that information. I think you'll get much better results if you went, if you did it as a dialogue and went and talked to them, and it really helps. And I think if across all of those, I think my advice definitely is to go broad and shallow. That was definitely the mantra that we had for the kind of scope that we were looking to roll out. And what I mean by broad and shallow is, like, we were trying to hit every device across our estate. We needed to basically lay the groundwork so that we could, if we needed to, write a new control that basically was able to then immediately roll out and scan those devices. So go broad, but shallow in that we ended up choosing 5. So for each device type, we basically worked out what our 5 key issues were with that particular device, and then coded around those. And again, they were the ones, they weren't just the first 5 that we thought of. They were kind of like, well, tell us all the issues, and then we kind of evaluated which ones they are. And by basically going broad and shallow, you're going to get your coverage, you're going to get the ability to basically roll out new controls and get the results, quickly. So yeah, don't boil the ocean. Go small, start small, and go with that. To give you a kind of idea of where we were going with the handoffs and the kind of the setup guides, we looked to kind of measure our progress. So one of the things we had lessons learned and best practices. So a best practice for us was the time saving, so that if we could take that handover document and reduce that handoff that somebody was having to wait and receive and then review the configuration, we could basically do some savings. So this is an example. So we have a manual process of 15 minutes to review the configuration of an application. And if you basically were able to automate that, and that automated process then went down to a minute, you're going from 3.125 man days down to basically 100 minutes of automated time that it saved you. So yeah, it's really key, and especially for high velocity clients where you're trying to reduce the time that they need to make changes quickly. A lot of RFCs in a day where you need to turn these around. By having this as code and something that you can automate really helps. Regarding the reducing unplanned work, so this was the lessons learned. To kind of create a measure for this, we chose to, we concluded that a critical compliance failure equated to 8 hours worth of unplanned work. So what I mean by that is a critical compliance failure would have equated to a Sev1 service outage for a customer. And we came to the conclusion that for every Sev1 that we had, there was at least 8 hours worth of effort related to the unplanned work. So if you take into account the person receiving the call, maybe there was a couple of hours for a couple of engineers to work on the issue. You then had to write an RFO, you needed to close off the response, you might have even needed an exec involvement to basically talk to the customer. So, try and consider how long or how many people are involved in your organisation when you do have those Sev1 issues, because if you are able to prove and then identify those, then you can really save a lot of effort. So as an example, if you, across 1,000 devices, you identified 100 critical issues, then that's 100 man days worth of unplanned work. It's really hard to quantify, but you do, I know it's only perceived benefit in that you haven't had the issues, but you've identified that the critical outage has burnt you in the past, so there's no reason why it potentially can't happen. So, you know, you can use something like this. And again, these metrics are just giving you as an examples of how we work, but, you know, take that into your organization and then have a look and see how it fits. Okay, you've reviewed the device matrix, you've got an idea of the kind of things you're going to target, the kind of things that you're going to write compliance checks for. Yeah, you think you know what you're going to do, but you're at a bit of a crossroads. And if I'm honest, there is a bit of a potential that you could turn out to be one of the most hated people in your company. The logic here is that you chose and then identified a number of failures. Great, but the execs are now really nervous that they're basically sitting on potential outages, and ops hate you for all the additional work that you just gave them. So how do you solve this? Sorry. Basically, don't sit in an ivory tower. Okay, adoption with ops is key. And like a good chess player where you're thinking X number of moves ahead, I think consider when you're sitting down and writing the controls, basically who's going to receive it, you know, who's going to receive, you know, why are you writing this control, who's going to basically receive it and then you know, action that potentially, you know, try and keep in mind who the person is you're writing the control for, who's going to consume it. Because I think if you can get the buy-in from ops, then that's key. And then by driving adoption and getting their buy-in, you can really help drive adoption in your organization. We ran a series where it was what one thing. I mentioned before we went broad and shallow, so we were trying to focus on 5 key controls for a particular device, but we were asking people what one thing would help them in their day. If we could write a compliance control, what one thing would help your day, or, you know, mean that you didn't get woken up out of night? Something that would spark the conversation. It was quite hard. I think people, when they thought, oh, well, we're writing code, well, I'm not a developer, you know, just really trying to empower people to just, you articulate to me the business challenge that you have, and and a team around us will convert that into code. And that's the bit that you really need to help. So yeah, ask the question and get them to choose, because if you are able to deliver a report that fixes the one thing that they asked for, I guarantee you they're going to support you, and they're going to follow through and actually probably support you in the resolution of getting those machines fixed. So yeah, do that, and also maybe do one idea sprints. So you've got that idea, just work around the problem. It could be that you need to articulate a business challenge and work on that one idea to kind of convert that into a control that then you can then roll out and then get those results. And I think integrate's kind of a key one. You really don't want to you don't really want to create another process that your operations team then have to consume, if that makes sense. What I mean is, if you go away and create a compliance report and then you give them another report that they then have to go and work and review, it just gets sidelined. You've basically got to find a way of integrating your reporting and the compliance kind of reports into their current operation. So if you can find routes through ticketing systems, or just, you know, something that integrates with how they currently deal with their operations, then you will get you get a better onboarding, you get people wanting to champion the idea, you get people wanting to talk about it. Certainly if you go and help this, you help someone with their one thing, and then, the word spreads around. It's those kind of things that really do help. We've even run lunchtime sessions where we kind of like just onboard people with the idea of compliance. But no one's allowed to arrive to the session because it's a free lunch. So you've at least got to turn up with an idea for a compliance control. And then through the course of the lunch session, we'll just evaluate all the things that have come in, and then kind of apply a bit of structure to it, evaluate their importance, and kind of get a steer. And then hopefully by the end of the session, we have evaluated which ones we want to focus on, and even potentially started describing the kind of resources that we're going to use in InSpec to actually deliver that control. I think then, your culture will begin. Baking the goodness. I wanted to give you a little bit more of a bit more of an example. This is, I suppose, a little more of an extreme example, but I want to prompt you now to kind of start considering the kind of metadata that you might want to add to your controls. Right? If you've never seen InSpec code before, right? It's not this. It doesn't look scary. In fact, the only thing that InSpec needs is a describe block. So if you looked at line 23, 24, 25, that's all InSpec needs. Okay. My advice to you is that you don't just do what it needs to run. Okay. You should at least wrap it in a control. And definitely, if you look at the top, start with a title. So this title is going to help you group and review your profiles at a later date, and allow you to present them in a better manner. So don't skip on the titles. Always make sure your controls have a unique ID. If you get into a bit of a copy and paste kind of thing where you're copying controls and they end up with the same ID, then the other one, you only get results from one. So try and do that. If we're going to commit something into our source control, I definitely made sure that we had a clear title. We kind of grouped controls with a little bit of a prefix in the title because it meant that we could report on it a bit easier. But one thing I made as a mandate, it needs a description, and it needed to pass a litmus test. So could your boss read the description of this control and understand what its intent is and what it's going to do? If it's not written in plain English that someone can understand, it needs to be rewritten. I did joke to the guys a couple of times that, look, I need to be able to phone my mum and read this, and she needs to tell me and understand what this control's doing. If you put that in, it means that anyone in your organisation just can pick it up and kind of understand what it's doing. Something we didn't add when we first started out through these concepts were tag and references. And we actually started to adopt certain particular tags, and then retrofitted them back into the controls that we currently have in production. We use the tags through a variety of ways. The way that we end up storing our tags and stuff, we're able to search on those. We commit our stuff back to Git, so we can basically do searches on those. But this particular example I took from the inspec.io website, and it's a really good example to kind of give you ideas of what kind of tags you'd want to use or add into your controls. Tags for remediation, for example, creating a symbol that will basically give you the cookbook that would remediate against this control. We added tags for source control. So we added a tag that referenced where the source control bit is for this compliance control. You can use reference. I made a point of referencing the fact that you could reference an internal ticketing system or maybe a wiki, just to kind of give a little bit more background to why you had this control, what it was, and where it came from. So try and consider those. They're free, and I kind of add it to the side. Like if you've got the data to hand and populate it, you'll probably start out maybe writing controls by hand. I think if I'm honest, we started off that way, but then once we got more comfortable with writing the controls, I used PowerShell to basically create a lot of the frameworks. We used PowerShell, for example, to go back and add the tags to the existing profiles that we could then commit back. So if you've got the data to hand and you're okay with a bit of scripting, then use that to basically populate your control with all the good, juicy metadata that you can basically add. And then all you have to do in your thing is then work on the describe block, which is the actual meat of what you need to do for the control. Our single biggest challenge, easily the winner was reporting. Certainly dealing with the first release of Chef Compliance. The first release of Chef Compliance was good. We had challenges around the reporting because we are a multi-tenant, multi-customer environment, and the way that we were collating and scanning the data meant that we couldn't easily split the data up or split the scan results up in between our customers. As you saw from the keynote today, that's now part of the new version of Automate. So happy days. Make sure you can use that. But I think definitely don't underestimate the importance of reporting. How you do that. I mean, we ended up not only reporting on the scan results, but we also applied the metrics that we did. So the amounts of time saving and potential risk or the potential amount of unplanned man days and stuff that we did. So we kind of import that up. But really just try and find the right medium that works for you and then also works for your customers. And I think consider your internal departments as customers as well. So just vary how you go. We ended up using PowerBI. And we use the information from the Chef or the docs.chef.io website. It gives you a breakdown on the compliance API. And one of the things you can do is if you give it a scan ID, it'll basically give you the results back as JSON. And then using Power BI, you can just import the JSON. It maps into, it can read the JSON in its native format and then basically give you a nice presentation layer. And we chose to do that because it meant that we could multi-tenant the results, we could give it to our customers, and so we were kind of masking the, I suppose, the Chef Compliance interface from them, because really they just wanted to know the details and they wanted to know the graphs. So that logic worked for us. I think at this point, I'll give you a timeline of where we were. So we started at the beginning of last year. So I suppose we're now 10 months in, and we've got the reporting done. We've built up quite an extensive library of controls. I mean, if you can imagine the number of devices, I can't even remember I need to ask my boss what the current count is on the number of controls we ended up coding. But we were very much still really delivering internal facing. It was still an internal facing kind of solution, whilst we were presenting the results as part of, back to the customer using Power BI. They were very much just hand in hand with what we were kind of already providing them within their portal. So we knew that we needed to basically make a change of basically taking it to the next level. So we set about, I suppose, for the last 6 months, using Chef Compliance, InSpec, and now Chef Server as a foundation. We ended up launching our Compliance as a Service platform and giving this to our customers. And it's essentially it's a set of web services with a web front end, so that we can basically delve into the data. It's interfacing with each of the servers, the Chef Compliance and the Chef Server APIs, acting as a bit of a middleware, allowing us to initiate scans on demand through a web interface. So customers can basically request on-demand scans of their servers, get the results, and then send them back. And really, it kind of starts from the beginning. It started at the gold templates, which once we got a handle on the gold templates, I can honestly tell you that was a pivotal moment in our transition, in our I suppose DevOps delivery, because I think I didn't appreciate how much it would mean. We're using Packer to basically develop the gold template images. I don't know how you're managing gold templates in your organisation at the moment. They were a bit of a black box in ours, if I'm honest. So we needed to get a better handle on it, and really moving the gold templates into code, as in, we're using Packer, but from an auditor's point of view, the first day I sat down and explained to the auditor when we came around to the discussions about master images, templates, how do we manage that? What's your business process? Showing the procedure, showing the templates. We run this process every 30 days. We generate gold templates dynamically every 30 days. We basically renew. And we build those out for the main OSs that we build, so OS, Windows, Red Hat, Windows. We, as part of the build, we're taking the Microsoft ISO images. It's got checksummed. We're then applying this configuration. We're then running all these post scripts. Using Packer, we can basically output certain post processes. So it spits out basically an image that is our production image that we can use on public cloud, but it also send out a vagrant box that we can then consume as part of a test kitchen image, and know that we're developing and testing stuff on machines that are the same OS that we're delivering into production. And we're using InSpec to basically validate the configuration inside the OS as we're building the gold template. And when the template's then created, we're using InSpec to validate that the gold image is successful and that the build's been good. If it's passed the validations, then it gets sent to object storage. So right at the beginning, we're able to, start embedding InSpec in there. And having that gold template process defined as code really changes, demists the magic that goes into what goes into a gold template, and it's in source control. So if people want to amend it or they want to add something into the build, we can do it. Moving on to the creation part of the platform. So based on the gold template images that we're using, it's able to provision into either private cloud, typically a VMware compliance, IBM Software / Bluemix or Azure. And as soon as it's created, it's making a callback to the compliance server and then adding that as a node and kicking off a scan. So it's compliance automation, proactively. We're scanning the nodes at least once every 24 hours based on a set of predefined profiles. And the really good thing about that is when the machine gets when we build the gold templates, we're baking in a lot of good configuration. Like, we're trying to do the right thing, but the compliance basically will initiate and scan it, but there will be failures because we haven't remediated or installed our management stack yet into the gold images. So it's really nice to basically see the trend analysis of the machine getting created, a load of compliance failures, but then them getting remedied. Before going into run and operate and getting into production. We're also using InSpec to validate the cloud account layer. So whilst we're using Chef Compliance to basically validate and audit the OS endpoint, we're also targeting the cloud APIs so that we make sure that the customer accounts are configured correctly. They have the right names, user accounts, notifications, password sets, anything that we can kind of find that we think's a potential risk of misconfiguration within the Azure portal or the software one, then we're basically using those. So we're really able to help validate the configuration at an infrastructure level and also within the OS. And at a run and operate level, we're now using Chef to help remediate some of the things that we find as part of the audit failures, but we're also utilising the audit cookbook So if you haven't come across that, that's a really good dovetail into this, whereas Chef Compliance is initiating a connection to the device, either over like a WinRM port or an SSH. The audit cookbook, as part of the Chef client, is initiating an outbound connection to basically pull in the profiles. So it's very much a belt and braces approach. We're coming in from the compliance, but we're also coming in from the audit, because it might be that you have a scenario where you can't have inbound connections coming in for whatever reasons. So yeah, make sure you don't forget the audit cookbook. It's good, and it's all about continuous compliance. And we're really trying to help change the mindset that compliance doesn't have to be boring, and it doesn't have to be just a blocker. Because if you can drive business benefits, it will help. So I suppose in closing, the Chef Compliance platform for us, it had baseline compliance. It really helped us gain insight into what was important, what were risks within our organisation. We extended it using by adopting best practice, lessons learned. I've translated personally a lot of documents, internal security policy documents for our customers that deal with the old paper binder, and we've been able to port that over. And once they see that as code, it's in source control. If anyone wants to change it, we've got all the history. That it just really dovetails in nicely. It's really helps. And we've been able to prove the reduction in rework and risk. I'll stop talking in a minute. In closing, I suppose, go with the one idea sprints. That really worked for us. It really helps them focus focus within your business. It helps them focus just on trying to help you help them, if that makes sense. Go broad and shallow. That definitely helped. Get over the challenges of interfacing with a new device type, so that if anything does come up that you need to immediately release a control for, you've already done the legwork, and you can literally write the control, kick off the scan, and get the results. Go broad and shallow, and remember to take people with you. Don't write a compliance report, take it to the front door of ops, ring the doorbell, and run away. It's just. If you do that, you'll launch a product and you'll have people use it. So, Thank you.